Marcus Chen's phone pierced the darkness at 3:17 a.m., its blue light casting harsh shadows across his bedroom ceiling. The district attorney had learned years ago that late-night calls rarely brought good news, especially on Championship Saturday when the entire city pulsed with adrenaline and poor decisions. "Sir, we've got a situation at stake," Detective Rivera's voice crackled through the speaker. "Two separate drug busts at fraternity parties. You're going to want to see this yourself." Chen fought the urge to remind Rivera that low-level drug charges didn't typically warrant waking up the DA. But something in the detective's tone made him swing his legs over the bed, careful not to wake his wife Sarah. 20 minutes later, Chen stood in the fluorescent-lit booking area of Central Precinct, two case files open on the metal desk before him. The booking photos caught his attention first. They always did. Thomas Bradford's image could have been mistaken for a senior portrait. Clean cut, confident smile, collar of his polo shirt perfectly straight. The timestamp showed 1:23 a.m. In contrast, Deandre Washington's photo, taken at 1:47 a.m., showed a young man with a swollen left eye, dry blood at the corner of his mouth, and a torn University Athletic Department sweatshirt. "Different precincts," Rivera explained, noting Chen's furrowed brow. Bradford was picked up at Phi Gamma's house, Washington at Beta Theta Pi, about 6 blocks apart. Chen flipped through the preliminary reports, his stomach tightening. Amounts. Bradford had 85 grams of cocaine, Washington had 82. Same purity based on initial testing, both allegedly selling at their respective parties. The facts aligned with unsettling precision. Chen had prosecuted enough cases to know that coincidences this perfect usually weren't coincidences at all. He looked up at the holding cells visible through the glass partition. Bradford was nowhere to be seen. "Bradford's already out," Rivera confirmed, answering the unasked question. His family's lawyer had him released on bail within the hour. Judge Harrison came in specially to sign off on it. Chen's jaw clenched. Harrison coming in at 2 a.m. to sign a bail order was unprecedented. Through the glass, he could see Washington sitting alone in cell 3, head bowed, still wearing that torn sweatshirt. Has Washington's family been notified? Rivera shuffled uncomfortably. He used his phone call to reach his mother, but she's working a double shift at Metro Hospital. Can't leave until 7 a.m. No one else to call for bail money. Chen walked to the evidence room, needing to see the physical items himself. 2 identical evidence bags contained near-identical amounts of white powder. 2 lives, 2 arrests, same night, same charge, but already moving through the justice system on very different tracks. His phone buzzed again. A text from Judge Harrison. "Hope you're handling the Bradford matter with appropriate discretion." His father chairs the Bar Association's Judicial Review Committee. Chen pocketed his phone without responding. Outside, the first hints of dawn painted the sky in shades of gray. He thought of his own daughter, Lily, peacefully asleep in her bedroom decorated with college pennants and dreams. She'd asked him just last week about equal justice under the law for her civics class project. He picked up both case files, their manila folders identical except for the booking numbers. Inside one, a handwritten note had already appeared. First offense, good family, candidate for diversion program. The other file contained only the basic arrest report and a sticky note marking a prior juvenile citation for skateboarding in a shopping center parking lot. Standing there in the quiet of early morning, Marcus Chen felt the weight of what was coming. These cases would force him to confront not just the justice system's inequities, but his own role in either challenging or perpetuating them. Championship Saturday's celebrations were winding down across the city, but for Chen, the real contest was just beginning. Monday morning found Marcus Chen in his office before sunrise, red-rimmed eyes fixed on the interview footage playing on his monitor. The timestamps didn't lie, but something else did. Bradford's interview played first. 22 minutes of polite conversation in interview room A, the good room with comfortable chairs and warm lighting. Bradford's family attorney, James Sullivan, interrupted precisely 4 times to whisper in his client's ear. The cocaine was for personal use, Bradford explained. He had no idea how it got into his jacket pocket. The officer nodded sympathetically. Chen switched to Washington's footage. Interview room C, harsh fluorescent lights flickering, a metal chair scraping concrete. 6 hours of questioning spread across multiple videos, with suspicious gaps in between. At 2:13 a.m., the footage cut out entirely for 2 hours due to what the report called technical difficulties. When recording resumed, Washington's previously uninjured right hand was swollen. "Mr. Chen." His assistant Julia knocked softly. "Officer Reyes is here about the body camera footage you requested." Reyes entered, clutching a USB drive like it might burn him. "Sir, there might be some irregularities in the Bradford arrest footage. Camera malfunction." "Another malfunction." Chen's voice stayed quiet, but Reyes flinched. "Show me what you have." The footage from Bradford's arrest was pristine. Officers approaching with respect. A quiet conversation on the fraternity house's manicured lawn. A gentle escort to the waiting patrol car. Bradford even joked with the officers about missing the game's fourth quarter. Washington's arrest footage started normally, officers responding to the same anonymous tip about drug sales. But as they approached the Beta House, several body cameras simultaneously developed technical issues. The only working footage came from a rookie officer's camera, showing Washington face down on wet concrete despite security camera evidence that he had his hands raised when they arrived. Chen's desk phone lit up. Judge Harrison again. He let it ring. "Julia," he called out, "get me the dispatch recordings from Saturday night. All channels from the hour before both arrests through booking." While waiting, Chen pulled up Bradford's preliminary statement. The handwriting caught his eye. Crisp and clear, nothing like the shaky script of most 2 a.m. statements. He checked the document properties. Last modified, 11:42 p.m. Saturday, almost 2 hours before Bradford's arrest. The dispatch recordings arrived, and Chen started listening. At 1:03 a.m., a call came in. "White male selling at Phi Gamma, approach with caution." At 1:05 a.m., "Black male dealer at Beta, potentially armed and dangerous." Same anonymous caller, same calm voice. Too calm. His cell phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Lily's school called. She's upset about something the Bradford boy said to her in AP Physics." Another buzz. An email from Sullivan requesting an immediate meeting about his client's unfortunate misunderstanding. Attached was a letter from Bradford's psychiatrist, dated last week, discussing stress-related medication that might explain his client's confused state during the incident. Chen pulled up Washington's file again. The juvenile skateboarding citation had been processed by Officer Reyes 3 years ago. The same Officer Reyes who just brought him conveniently malfunctioning body camera footage. "Julia," he called again, "find me every case in the last 5 years where we had multiple body camera malfunctions during an arrest. And get me Washington's public defender on the phone." As Julia hurried out, Chen noticed a small note that had been slipped under his door. In neat handwriting. "Check the evidence log timestamps. They don't match the photos." R. Chen pulled up the digital evidence database. The cocaine from both cases had been logged at exactly the same time, down to the second. Physically impossible if they were truly separate arrests. Outside his window, students hurried across rain-slit streets to morning classes. 2 worlds spinning simultaneously, one where justice moved smoothly. Ling Ni Ji Chong Man Zhang A. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Xi Tong Bu Shi Pai De. Ta Wan Quan and Zhao Qi Ji Yun Sting. The system wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. The knock on Chen's office door came at 8:47 p.m., long after most of the courthouse had emptied. Judge Harrison's familiar silhouette cast a long shadow through the frosted glass. "Marcus, my boy." Harrison's voice carried its usual jovial tone as he entered uninvited. "Beautiful evening for golf, isn't it?" Chen looked up from the stack of evidence photos spread across his desk. "I don't golf, Your Honor." "Shame. Best deals are made on the back nine. Richard Bradford and I were just discussing that this afternoon between holes." Harrison settled into the leather chair opposite Chen's desk, uninvited. Remarkable how a father's influence can shape a young man's future. The implied message hung heavy in the air. Chen said nothing, instead sliding a particular photo into better view. The timestamp discrepancy he discovered earlier. Harrison's eyes flickered to it briefly. You know, Marcus, your daughter's Yale application, the one she's so excited about. The Bradford family has quite a legacy there. 3 generations of generous donors. Before Chen could respond, his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. A video link, nothing else. He clicked it. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Deandre Washington meeting with Lieutenant Sanders from narcotics 3 weeks before his arrest. The audio was crystal clear. Just wear the wire, kid. Help us catch the real suppliers, and your brother's possession charge disappears. Something interesting? Harrison asked, noting Chen's expression. Just some new evidence. Chen kept his voice neutral. Speaking of evidence, I've been meaning to ask, how did you know to be available for Bradford's bail hearing at 2 a.m.? The judge's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Lucky coincidence. I was up late reviewing cases. At the country club, the bail order was sent from their IP address. The conversation was interrupted by urgent knocking. Julia burst in, tablet in hand. Sir, you need to see this. The local news website's headline screamed across the screen. DUL justice. Video shows stark contrast in university drug busts. Below it, split-screen footage from both arrests played silently. Harrison stood abruptly. Marcus, think carefully about your next steps. Certain paths, once taken, can't be undone. After the judge left, Chen's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Washington's mother. Her voice trembled with a mixture of fear and anger. Mr. Chen, I need to tell you something about that night. Deandre, he was working for them. The police, I mean. He'd been wearing a wire for weeks. Said they promised to help his little brother. She paused. I have the recordings. All of them. Chen's mind raced. If Washington was an informant, why was he arrested? Unless, his computer chimed. An email from an anonymous account contained a single document, a country club membership list. He scrolled through it quickly. Judge Harrison, Richard Bradford, and surprisingly, Lieutenant Sanders from narcotics, whose salary shouldn't have covered the 6-figure membership fee. Julia appeared in the doorway again. Sir, Washington's public defender is here, says it's urgent. The defender, Karen Martinez, looked exhausted as she dropped a thick file on Chen's desk. They're trying to bury it, but I found something. 3 other cases, same pattern. College kids used as informants, then arrested when they got too close to certain names. All prosecuted by ADA Phillips. Phillips? Chen frowned. He's on vacation. No, he's not. Martinez pulled up a photo on her phone. This was taken an hour ago at the country club. Phillips, Judge Harrison, Bradford Sr., and guess who else? The supposed anonymous tipster who called in both arrests. Chen's desk phone lit up again, the DA's office, probably calling about the news story. As he reached for it, another text came through. This one from his daughter. Dad, you need to know something. The day before the arrest, I overheard Thomas Bradford talking to someone on the phone in physics. He said everything was set up for Saturday night, said his dad's friends would take care of the competition. I think he was talking about Deandre. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture far darker than even Chen had imagined. But as he stared at the evidence before him, one question loomed larger than all others. How many careers and lives was he willing to risk to expose the truth? The black SUV had been following Chen for 3 days. Always different drivers, but always the same tinted windows and government plates. He noticed it again in his rearview mirror as he pulled into the courthouse parking garage. Your 9 o'clock is here, Julia announced as he entered his office. She slipped him a note. Watch what you say. Found a bug behind your desk lamp. Chen's 9 o'clock was Karen Martinez, Washington's public defender. She looked worse than their last meeting, dark circles under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. They're trying to force me off the case, she whispered, sliding a formal complaint across his desk. Judge Harrison's clerk filed this yesterday. Claims I have a conflict of interest because my cousin once worked at Metro Hospital, where Washington's mother works. Chen's phone buzzed. A thick envelope had arrived at his home. Inside, his daughter Lily's Yale acceptance letter bore a handwritten post-it note. The Bradford Family Scholarship Committee looks forward to reviewing her application. Merit isn't everything these days. The threat was elegant in its subtlety. In the courthouse hallway, Chen overheard two officers discussing Washington's case. Lieutenant says the evidence might not make it to trial. Evidence room had a plumbing issue last night. Lots of water damage. Chen rushed to the evidence room, finding a maintenance crew already cleaning up. The sprinkler system had malfunctioned, but only over the section containing Washington's case files. Radford's evidence, stored just one shelf over, remained perfectly dry. Back in his office, Chen found District Attorney Phillips had returned early from his vacation. Marcus, Phillips closed the door behind him. The Bradford matter needs to go away. Quietly. You understand what's at stake here? Justice? Chen suggested. Phillips didn't smile. Your career? Your daughter's future? Your family's safety? Is that a threat? An observation? Like how I observe you driving 15 miles over the speed limit, taking Lily to dance class every Thursday. Or how I observe your brother Tommy's weekly visits to that sports betting parlor in Chinatown. Phillips placed a manila envelope on the desk. Just photos. For now. After Phillips left, Chen's personal cell phone rang. A number he hadn't seen in 20 years. His old law professor, Jan Morrison. Marcus, I heard what's happening. Remember that case study from your third year? The one about the '85 corruption scandal. Her voice was urgent. Check the archives. Same players, different generation. And Marcus, they buried that prosecutor in legal fees until he lost everything. Be careful. The afternoon brought another surprise. Judge Harrison's daughter, Alexandra, appeared in his office unannounced. Unlike her father, her reputation was built on civil rights cases. This isn't just about two college students, she said, placing a USB drive on his desk. I've been tracking sentencing data for 10 years. The pattern is clear. Same crimes, same evidence, different outcomes based on race and class. But this case, she paused, this case could break it all open. If you're brave enough. Ken's office phone lit up. Julia's voice crackled through. Sir, Deandra Washington's mother is on line 1. She's been fired from Metro Hospital. No explanation. Before he could pick up, his computer pinged. An email from the State Bar Association. An ethics complaint had been filed against him, citing his handling of the Bradford Washington cases. The sender's IP address traced back to the country club. Chen looked out his window at the SUV still waiting in the parking lot. On his desk, the evidence photos seemed to stare back at him. Two young men's lives, twisted into a knot of power, privilege, and corruption. His desk phone lit up again. This time, it was Sarah. Marcus, someone's been in our house. Nothing's missing, but Lily's college acceptance letter is on the kitchen table. We never brought it home. The message was clear. They could reach him anywhere. But as Chen stared at the growing web of threats and revelations before him, something unexpected happened. Instead of fear, he felt a strange sense of clarity. They wouldn't be working this hard to stop him if he wasn't getting close to something big. The body camera footage hit social media at 9:47 a.m. By noon, the courthouse steps had become a sea of protesters, their signs demanding justice in two different cases that were rapidly becoming one symbol of systemic inequality. Chen watched from his office window as news vans lined up along the street. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since the footage leaked, though leaked seemed too accidental a word for something so strategically timed. Dad? Lily's voice was quiet behind him. She'd never visited his office before, but today was different. My whole AP government class watched the videos in school today. Is it true what they're saying about Thomas's dad? Before Chen could answer, Julia rushed in. Sir, you need to see this. The local news was running side-by-side comparisons of the arrests. Bradford's gentle treatment played next to Washington's violent takedown, while experts discussed racial bias in policing. But it was the ticker at the bottom that caught Chen's attention. Anonymous source reveals pattern of selective prosecution in drug cases. His father's voicemail from that morning echoed in his mind. Son, remember when they arrested your Uncle David in '92? Same story, different decade. They said he resisted too. We stayed quiet then. I've regretted it ever since. The protest crowd parted suddenly as Deandra Washington's mother approached the courthouse, still wearing her Metro Hospital scrubs from the night shift she managed to keep at a different facility. News cameras swarmed as she spoke, her voice steady despite her tears. "My son was trying to do the right thing," she said. "He worked with them, trusted them. Now he's in jail while that other boy walks free. Tell me how that's justice." Chen's desk phone lit up, Radford's father demanding an immediate meeting. But before Chen could respond, Alexandra Harrison burst into his office, clutching a stack of papers. "Marcus, look at this." She spread documents across his desk. "I found my father's old case files. In 1985, he prosecuted a similar case before he became a judge. 2 students, nearly identical charges. Guess how he handled it?" The parallels were unsettling. Same country club connections, same pattern of evidence mishaps, same pressure on the families. But something was different in the photos from '85, and it hit Chen like a physical blow. In one, he recognized his own father, standing in the background, watching silently as another family fought the same battle. His computer pinged. Someone had anonymously sent him decades of booking photos from drug arrests at the university. The pattern was stark. White students consistently photographed uninjured, given phone calls, released quickly. Others showing unexplained injuries, held longer, pressured into confessions. "Sir?" Julia appeared again. "Washington's sister is here with something you need to see." Tesha Washington, a pre-law student at the university, carried herself with the same dignity as her brother. She placed a USB drive on his desk. "Deandra didn't just wear a wire for them," she said. "He kept his own recordings. Every meeting, every promise they made, including the one where they told him which fraternity party to attend that night." Outside, the protest had grown. Chen could hear them chanting both names now, Bradford and Washington, turning them into a rhythm that demanded accountability. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Your mother wants to tell you something about your Uncle David's case. Says it's time you knew the whole story." The pieces were aligning across decades, patterns of power, silence, and selective justice that had shaped his own family's history without him even knowing it. Chen looked at the faces in the old booking photos again, seeing them with new eyes. Each one represented a moment where someone in power had chosen to perpetuate the cycle. Now he faced the same choice. The chants from outside grew louder, drumming against his window like a heartbeat. His daughter still stood beside his desk, watching him with eyes that would remember this moment and the choice he made. "Dad," she said softly, "my government teacher says systems only change when people inside them are brave enough to tell the truth. Are you?" Officer Michael Torres sat across from Chen, his rookie uniform still creased and new. His hands trembled slightly as he placed a phone on the desk between them. "I recorded everything," Torres said quietly. "The orders to turn off body cams, the call from Judge Harrison before the arrest, Lieutenant Sanders telling us which evidence to log first." He glanced at the door. "They don't know I'm here." Chen studied the young officer's face. "You understand what coming forward means." "I joined to serve justice, not cover it up." Torres stood. "Check your email in an hour. I've backed everything up." But 3 hours later, Chen's email remained empty. Julia rushed in with the news. Torres had been suddenly transferred to midnight patrol in the county's remotest precinct, effective immediately. His locker had already been cleared out. Chen's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Officer Torres sends his regrets." Amazing how a young officer's cocaine possession charge from college can suddenly resurface. The message came with an attachment. Surveillance photos of Chen's brother Tommy leaving Golden Palace, a known front for illegal gambling. The timestamp was yesterday. "They're trying to bury this thing deeper than Jimmy Hoffa," Alexandra Harrison said, dropping into the chair across from Chen. "She'd become an unexpected ally in the past week, but look what I found in the court archives." She spread out 3 decades of sentencing data, color-coded by race, class, and social connections. The pattern was undeniable, but it was the handwritten notes in the margins that caught Chen's attention. His predecessors had noticed too. Each time they'd been silenced. His computer chimed. Radford's lawyer had sent over a proposed deal, 2 years probation, sealed record, and a generous donation to establish a youth center in Washington's neighborhood. Everyone wins, the email concluded. Before Chen could respond, Julia patched through a call from Washington's public defender. They're pressing him to take a plea. Martinez's voice was urgent. 15 years, no chance of appeal. They gave him an hour to decide. Chen's desk phone flashed, the DA's office. On his cell, a text from Sarah. Someone left photos of Lily at dance class on our doorstep. Marcus, I'm scared. The walls were closing in, but something didn't add up. Chen reviewed Torres' initial statement, comparing it to the timestamps on Washington's wire recordings. There was a gap, 20 crucial minutes when all official records went dark. Sir, Julia appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Judge Harrison's clerk just leaked tomorrow's docket. They're transferring both cases to Judge Reynolds. Reynolds. Chen's blood went cold. Reynolds was Harrison's golf partner, known for rubber stamping whatever the DA's office wanted. His cell phone buzzed again. Alexandra Harrison, found something in my father's safe. Meeting records from the country club. This goes higher than we thought. Much higher. A commotion erupted in the hallway. News cameras crowded around a familiar figure, Bradford's father, emerging from an emergency meeting with the DA. His smile suggested victory. Chen's computer pinged one last time. An email from an encrypted account contained a single video file. The footage was dark, shot from a high angle, but the audio was crystal clear. Judge Harrison, Bradford Sr., and Lieutenant Sanders, planning every detail of the arrests 3 weeks in advance. The sender's message was simple. Choose wisely. You're not the first to have this evidence. You could be the last. Chen looked at his office wall, where 2 framed photos hung side by side. In one, his father stood silent outside a courthouse in 1992, watching justice fail. In the other, Lily beamed at her middle school graduation, believing in a world where truth mattered. His phone buzzed with a final text, this one from Deander Washington himself. Whatever you decide, sir, I understand. Some systems are too big to fight. Chen thought of Torres, silenced by his own past. Of his uncle David, broken by the same machine 30 years ago. Of his daughter asking if he was brave enough to tell the truth. He reached for his phone, not to surrender, but to make 2 calls that would change everything. First to the FBI's Public Corruption Division, then to every media outlet in the city. Some systems were too big to fight alone. The courtroom fell silent as Deander Washington took the stand. Gone was his university sweatshirt, replaced by a borrowed suit that hung slightly loose on his frame after weeks in custody. Behind him, every bench was packed. Protesters, reporters, students, and families who'd faced similar injustices over the years. Please state your name for the record, Chen began, standing at the podium. Deander Marcus Washington. His voice carried clearly, steadier than anyone expected. And were you working as a confidential informant for the Narcotics Division prior to your arrest? Before Washington could answer, Bradford's lawyer shot up. Objection. This line of questioning goes directly to establishing a pattern of misconduct. Chen countered, producing a stack of documents. Evidence items 47 through 53. Recordings of Lieutenant Sanders promising Mr. Washington immunity in exchange for his cooperation. Judge Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. His usual confident demeanor had cracked since the FBI agents arrived that morning, boxing up files from the country club's private offices. I agreed to wear a wire, Washington continued, because they had evidence my little brother Marcus had cocaine in his gym locker. Later I found out they planted it there, just to pressure me. The gallery murmured. Chen noticed Officer Torres slip into the back row, still in his midnight patrol uniform, dark circles under his eyes but determination in his stance. Tell us about the night of your arrest, Chen prompted. Lieutenant Sanders told me to be at Betta House. Said they needed evidence on the supplier. Washington's voice caught slightly. I was supposed to be working for them, but when I got close to connecting Bradford's father to the supply chain, suddenly I'm the one in handcuffs. Bradford's father stood abruptly, whispering urgently to his son's lawyer, but before they could object again, Chen played the wire recording from that night. Washington's voice came through clearly. Mr. Bradford, I have the money you wanted me to deliver to the lieutenant." The courtroom erupted. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel, but the damage was done. In the gallery, Chen spotted Alexandra Harrison taking notes while her father was conspicuously absent, having recused himself that morning citing health concerns. "Your Honor," Bradford's lawyer approached the bench, "we'd like to propose a resolution. My client is willing to provide testimony about certain institutional arrangements in exchange for consideration." "Turning on your own father?" Chen raised an eyebrow. That must have been a difficult breakfast conversation. "Actually," Thomas Bradford stood, his polished facade finally cracking, "I haven't spoken to him since I found out the truth. About Washington's brother. About all of it." He turned to face Washington directly. "I'm sorry. I thought it was just business, just the way things worked. I was wrong." Washington's mother sobbed quietly in the gallery. Beside her sat Lily Chen, who had insisted on attending despite her parents' concerns. Her government class had turned this trial into their semester project. Chen produced his final piece of evidence, the complete courthouse surveillance footage from the night of the arrests, showing Judge Harrison's midnight arrival, the evidence logging irregularities, everything. As it played, he noticed several jurors wiping away tears. "The state rests," Chen announced, but Washington raised his hand. "Sir, if I may." He turned to face the gallery. "This isn't just about me and Bradford. It's about every kid who looks like me, who gets told there's one set of rules for them and another for everyone else. It's about Officer Torres risking everything to tell the truth. It's about Mr. Chen's daughter watching to see if justice is possible." He paused. "It's about finally saying enough." The silence that followed felt like a turning point, not just for two college students, but for a system that had perpetuated inequality for generations. In the back of the courtroom, reporters frantically typed on their phones, while outside, the crowd had grown so large it spilled into nearby streets. Judge Reynolds cleared his throat. "In light of these revelations, this court has no choice but to—" Before he could finish, Bradford's father stood one last time, a piece of paper clutched in his hand. "I'd like to change my plea," he announced, "and I'm ready to name names." 1 year later, Marcus Chen stood at the podium of the State Bar Association's annual conference, facing a room full of legal professionals eager to understand how one case had sparked a seismic shift in the justice system. The Bradford-Washington case wasn't unique, Chen began, adjusting his notes. What made it different was that people at every level finally chose to speak up. In the front row, Officer Torres sat in his new suit, his FBI badge visible at his belt. After helping break open the corruption case, he'd been recruited to a special task force investigating systemic bias in law enforcement. Beside him, Alexandra Harrison nodded, her civil rights firm now handling a record number of reform cases. "The numbers tell the story," Chen continued, bringing up a series of graphs. "Since the implementation of the Washington-Bradford Protocol 6 months ago, we've seen a 78% reduction in sentencing disparities across racial and socioeconomic lines. The protocol, named after both students involved, mandated blind initial case reviews, body camera accountability, and independent oversight of plea deals. It had already been adopted by 3 neighboring states." Chen's phone buzzed quietly, a text from Sarah with a photo of Lily's dorm room at Yale. She turned down the Bradford Family Scholarship, instead accepting a full ride based on her essay about the case. Her new roommate, Tasha Washington, now in her first year of law school. After the presentation, Chen found Deandra Washington waiting in the lobby. No longer the scared student in a borrowed suit, he'd become a powerful advocate for reform, running a nonprofit that helped young offenders navigate the justice system. "The Youth Center opens next week," Washington said, falling into step beside Chen. "Thomas Bradford's been helping with the fundraising. Never thought I'd say this, but he's actually doing good work." Bradford had served 6 months in a minimum security facility, then thrown himself into advocacy work. His testimony had helped convict his father and several other power players, including Judge Harrison and Lieutenant Sanders. More importantly, he'd become a vocal critic of the privilege that had nearly made him complicit in destroying another young man's life. Chen's phone buzzed again. Julia, still his assistant, but now running a department-wide transparency initiative. Sir, you're trending again. The Washington Post piece just dropped. The article detailed how the case had exposed decades of systematic corruption. Judge Reynolds had resigned in disgrace. The country club's membership had been cut in half. But more significantly, a new generation of law enforcement officers and legal professionals was rising, determined to do better. Mr. Chen, a voice called out. A group of law students approached, laptops clutched to their chests. We're doing our thesis on the case. Could you tell us about the moment you decided to risk everything? Chen thought back to that night in his office, surrounded by evidence of corruption that spanned generations. He remembered his daughter's question about bravery, his father's regret about staying silent, and Washington's dignity on the stand. The real question, he replied, wasn't whether to risk everything. It was whether we could live with ourselves if we didn't. Later that evening, Chen visited the new courthouse annex, recently renamed the Torres Washington Justice Center. Inside, a wall displayed photos of every case that had been reopened and reviewed since the scandal broke. Hundreds of families had found justice, their stories finally heard. His father stood silently beside him, staring at the old photo of Uncle David's arrest that now hung as part of the historical exhibit. You did what I couldn't, the older man said softly. You broke the cycle. Chen watched as new cases arrived, each one processed under the reformed system. Young prosecutors, diverse and determined, worked alongside veteran officers who'd chosen integrity over tradition. The change wasn't perfect, but it was real. Outside, the sun set behind the city skyline. On the courthouse steps, a group of law students gathered for a study session, their discussion echoing up to Chen's window. In their voices, he heard the future of justice, not a system of power and privilege, but one of equity and truth. The old guard had called it a breaking point, but standing there, watching the next generation take up the cause of justice, Chen realized it had actually been a turning point. Sometimes, he reflected, the most powerful changes come not from breaking a system, but from reimagining what it could be.